Hi everyone, so this is going to be my second video on the October problem of the month, and this is just designed to be an extra resource that you can watch and get help with. You're also, of course, welcome to work with your friends. You're welcome to stay after class, get help with me, email me. I'm happy to help you in any way that I can, but this video I'm going to kind of go over the plan for the second week and hopefully answer any questions that you might have. So this video is going to be in 3 parts. We're going to talk about the plan for the problem of the month as a whole. We're going to talk about working on the write-up, which is your task for this week. And then if you want to go ahead and work on what we're going to be doing next week, we're going to talk about other solving strategies for the problem of the month. So the plan for this week is, this is of course our timeline. We are now in the second week. And last week, hopefully you completed the 6 getting started questions. If you haven't already done these, they're the first 6 questions in the problem of the month document. You can go into Google Classroom, and there's another video before this one where I give you some help on those questions. So you should make sure you've done this before you continue with this video and get started working on the claim and evidence sections of your write-up. In this video, we're going to start talking about how to work on your write-up, because that's what we're going to be doing this week. Next week, you're going to finish up the write-up. You're going to do the last section, and I'll make a video for that when the time comes. And finally, on the last week, if you've done all of these, the last week will just be a time to revise it, make sure yours is in perfect shape to hand in so you can get a great grade on the problem of the month. Again, I would highly recommend doing this week by week. It should only be 30 to 45 minutes of work a week if you stick with it. But if you wait till the end, it's going to be like 3 or 4 hours you have to do all at once. So this is the plan for this week. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the claim and evidence sections of your write-up. So here is the October problem of the month. Now, last week, hopefully you've already answered all 6 of these getting started questions. And these questions, if you answered all of them, you've actually already solved the problem. You'll note that the problem asked you, it says your task is to recommend the best price to sell these t-shirts and find the break-even point for that price. Well, what did you do in these questions? You chose a price, and eventually in question number 5, you found the break-even point. So if you answered all of these 6 questions, you've solved the problem and you're ready to start the write-up. So what is the write-up? This is going to look the same for every problem of the month we do. So in November, we're going to do another problem. It's going to be a different problem, but it's going to be the same write-up. And the write-up consists of 3 different parts: the claim, the evidence, and the reasoning. This week, we're just working on the claim and the evidence. The claim you should think of like your introduction to the problem. If you were to hand this write-up to someone and they didn't know the problem, what would you want them to read first? Well, you would write about the question you were trying to answer. So in this case, what question were you trying to answer? Whatever that was, write it down. Then you're going to write, what information were you given? Be sure to provide all relevant information. This section, this second box, should have all the information you need so that if I deleted the first page, you could still solve the problem. So that if I gave someone this, they could still solve the problem, even if they didn't see the original problem. So this second box, you should put all of the numbers you were given, all of the information, all of the questions that were asked, everything you need to solve for the problem. And finally, in the last box, you need to say, what was your answer? So if you decided that the best price is $15, it was up to you, and you found the break-even point was 6, then you'd write that. By the way, this is not the correct break-even point, but that's just an example. Important that you should also always use units. So when you say 6 was the break-even point, 6 what? Think about, what does that number 6 actually represent in the problem? So that's the claim. In this, you're just saying what you were trying to figure out, what information you were given, and what was your final answer. The evidence is where you show actually how you solved the problem. So here you would talk about, here I would recommend this first section, taking a picture of the math. If you did it on a piece of paper, if you wrote it up here, you could copy and paste it down here, but actually show the math you did. And then in the second box, you're going to explain the steps you did. So you might say, first I did this, then I did this. A really important word people leave out a lot is the word because. You shouldn't just say, I added 3 plus 5. You should say, I added 3 plus 5 because 3 represents the shirts, or something like that. So make sure you're saying because and explaining why you're doing each step. And once you've done this, this just needs to be a rough draft for this week because you're going to have time to revise it. I'll give you feedback. Just try and explain as thoroughly as possible so that if I took your write-up and gave it to another teacher in the school, to Miss LePan or Mr. Sacco, a teacher who didn't teach math, they should be able to understand the math you did and why you did it. They should be convinced that you got the right answer because you showed them all of your work. So make sure you're explaining it as best you can, and I hope this has been helpful. Okay, so if you're curious, the reasoning section, the last section, is where you would work on solving the problem a second way. So up here, you solve the problem one way. In the reasoning section, you want to solve the problem using a different method. So if you did algebra in the first way, you might do it with a picture. If you did a picture the first way, you might do it with a table. And now I'm going to show you a couple of different ways you might consider solving the problem. Okay, so you may remember this example from the last video. I'm going to show you in this video a couple of different ways you could solve the problem. So remember, this scenario was one in which we were starting a business. We were paying Miss Smith $5 because we wanted to sell candy at school in her classroom. We were paying a friend $10 to help us sell it. We were selling the candy for $2 each, and we were buying each piece for 50 cents. And we were trying to find the revenue, the expenses, and we ultimately found the break-even point, which I think was 10 pieces of candy. We highlighted it in red. And we did this by solving an equation, right? You can go back and watch that video if you want to see. We wrote the expression for revenue, the expression for expenses. We set them equal to each other. We solved it, and we got x equals 10, which meant that was the break-even point. But there's other ways you could solve this problem. For example, one way is you can make a table. This is one of my favorite ways to solve the problem. So we'll go ahead and make a table here. It will have 3 columns. The first one will be pieces of candy sold. This is going to be a number. And it's going to be total revenue and total expenses. So we can just start at the beginning. What happens if we sell 1 piece of candy? Well, the revenue from that is going to be $2, right? We know we sell the candy for $2 each. The total expenses, we have to pay Miss Smith $5, right? We have to pay a friend $10, and then we have to buy the candy for 50 cents. Okay, so right now our total expenses are $15.50. A lot more than $2, so we're not at the break-even point yet. Let's do another example. How about 2 pieces of candy? Well, 2 times 2 is $4 of revenue. Again, we have $5 for Miss Smith, $10 for paying a friend, and now each piece of candy is 50 cents, so it's going to be $1 for both pieces of candy. So $16 total. We're still not close. Well, you can keep going. Maybe let's try 5 pieces of candy. What will the total revenue be? We sell each for $2. 5 times 2 is $10. How about the total expenses? Well, now we've got 5 plus 10 plus, and now it's 50 cents times 5, so $2.50. So we have $17.50. You can see the total revenue, $10, is getting closer to the total expenses, but they're still not equal yet. And you could keep doing example after example after example. When you eventually get to 10, you'll do the math and you'll see it costs $20 and the total expenses are $20. If you're doing this on your own problem, you might have to jump around and find different numbers. Eventually, you'd find the number that's the closest to the break-even point. There may not be an exact break-even point, or that break-even point may be a decimal or a fraction. So this is one way you could do it. Another way you could do it is graphically. So we wrote these expressions, right? The revenue is 2x. The expenses are 15 plus 0.5x. You could actually graph both of these lines. Graph the lines. The revenue is going to be a graph that is equal to y equals 2x. And the expenses will be a graph that is y equals 0.5x plus 15. Graph both of these, and I can't draw it on here, but if you get a piece of graph paper or even an internet app that graphs it, you'll see two lines, and those two lines are going to cross at some point, and the point where they cross, that's the break-even point. So that's another strategy you could try. Of course, you can also do the algebra that we did before. So yeah, here's 3 different strategies you could use to potentially solve the problem. You only need to do 2. And again, you don't need to start on this until next week. This is not going to be due until the 3rd week of October, so you've got time. It's just if you want to get ahead and start solving it a different way, you could try this.